Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D,
And I'm G.
and we've got a great set of topics tonight. Welcome everybody back. We've a lot of things have been going on in the news, and it's almost too much to keep up with every day. I talked to a friend of mine that was very politically active, and she said she felt like she was drowning in news because there's so much. So we're going to
Right.
jump off and hit some hot topics tonight, round robin and everything. So let's start talking about. We've had our first presidential debate. Let's talk about overall impressions, and then talk about maybe some of the highlights and lowlights. So, G-Man, I'll kick it over to you and let you talk about some of your overview thoughts of the debate.
Well, my first overview thought is that it was a total debacle. I don't think I've seen a presidential debate more raucous than that, and the reviews coming out afterward seem to echo that. I think I read where Trump interrupted Biden 71 times, and Biden interrupted Trump 22 times. And so now the debate commission is looking at ways to kind of combat that, and they're looking at muting mics and maybe having them in their own soundproof booth where they can hear the responses but not respond. I think what we're looking at is that the end of the debates for this presidential cycle.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know what's going to happen exactly because of President Trump has already said he does not want to accept any rule changes at this point, which I think is his way of getting out of debating
Right.
any longer.
Yep.
Overall, it's about what I expected. I knew it would be a pretty big mess. That Trump had talked about, and his advisors had talked about the fact that he hadn't done much preparation. That was a little bit of a white lie, because they said that they were doing some prep. It came out later, but it was more along the lines of, I think, Chris Christie and a few other advisors just kind of peppering him with some questions, not having a stage set up, not thinking about necessarily what Joe Biden's answers would be. So the prep clearly wasn't there. Trump gets annoyed when anyone confronts him with facts and facts about his presidency. I think the harder challenge for him this time is that he loves to talk in hyperbole, and he actually has a record this time that he has to run on. Last time he didn't have a record. He never held elective office.
Right.
I thought Biden got some good points in. It was hard to watch because of the interruptions, and there's always going to be interruptions, and it happens in any kind of debate. But just the constant talking over,
Right.
especially by Trump, it was just trying to bully and try to bulldoze the debate. And I think he thought he was going to come across strong, and he may have come across that way to some of the people in his base. But I don't think he did anything to win over any undecideds or any of the suburban white vote that he really needs to get out
Right.
and win back. A lot of people who voted for Obama in 2012 switched to Trump in 2016, and now are taking a hard look at Biden. I don't think that Trump did anything to win those folks back.
Yeah, I agree. And I did see a story that said basically the polls show that 2% changed their vote towards Biden. So if anything, it totally backfired for Trump. I tell you what, though, there were some zingers in there that, like when Biden said, why don't you just shut up, man? That will be debate highlights for years to come. But
Yes.
as you and I've talked off air, I think that Biden's camp prepared him poorly. I know that he came out, the results show that, most of the pundits say he won the debate, but I think he could have gotten a lot more zingers in. So, for instance, when he was talking, poignantly about his son, Beau Biden, who served in Iraq and was highly decorated, and Trump just basically poo-pooed that and brought up his son, Hunter Biden, I would have turned to him and just very pointedly and with as much venom in my voice as I could have mustered, I would have said, I don't think anybody who had 5 deferments for fake bone spurs is qualified to judge either one of my sons.
Yeah.
And the audience would have resonated with that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that he definitely could have put his foot on the gas harder there, but I will say the way Trump just ignored the comment about him without any kind of empathy, it just echoed the way that when he talks about the coronavirus, he has no empathy for the families of the 200,000 plus that have passed away. And so it almost stands on its own. A couple other things that stood out for me. I thought, and it kind of gets glossed over because of all the wild accusations that Trump and the Republicans say about Hunter. But when Trump attacked Hunter Biden for having a drug problem, I thought that, and there's not a lot of people talking about this, but I thought that Joe Biden's answer was very poignant. And I think it resonated with a lot of families because there's a lot of families who deal with addictions and addiction problems. And he talked about the fact that Hunter had a problem and Hunter dealt with this problem and he's proud of his son. And I thought that was a really strong moment for that. To be brought up in a presidential debate. I don't know that we've ever had a presidential candidate that's talked that poignantly about a family member that's suffered, because statistics show that every family has a problem of some type, whether it be drugs or alcohol or some other type of addiction. So
right.
I thought that was
well, and if you've got the family history that Trump has, you'd think that you wouldn't want to be, they say those that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Well, there's a pretty strong case that you look at the things he accused Hillary Clinton of in the last campaign and some of the stuff he's tried to accuse Vice President Biden of. There's a pretty strong case that Trump just peddles in projection.
Yeah.
And so the things that are wrong with him or the things he doesn't like about himself, he tries to project on other people.
Well,
one other point. Go ahead.
It's like his healthcare program. He says he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions. And yet they don't have a plan. The only plan he has is, I'm going to pass this, or sign this executive order, which doesn't mean squat in the private sector.
Nope, you're right.
It applies to the government sector, but not to the private sector. So, if you're working for McDonald's or Hobby Lobby or any of those companies, they don't have to abide by that. They don't have to honor your pre-existing conditions. And so, it's kind of a hollow argument that a lot of people might not see through.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of Nixon's secret plan to get us out of Vietnam, that he wouldn't tell us until he won.
Right.
And it's the same kind of thing, except for the fact that Trump's had 4 years. He said that last time.
Right.
Oh, he has a great plan. It's going to be better than Obamacare. You're going to get great health care, all these things. And he's yet to release a plan. He said it even 2 weeks ago in the town hall with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News, that he had a great plan that had better coverage. And he doesn't have a plan. Everyone knows He doesn't have a plan. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think that's going to be one of the kugels that the Democrats use against the Republicans, especially in the vulnerable Senate seats, because healthcare is a top polling priority. One more point I don't want us to miss out on with the debate and the debate recap is, I got to ask this question. It's a little bit rhetorical, but I got to ask, and I'll pose it to you, G-Man, and see how you would answer this question as a candidate. But will you once and for all repudiate white nationalism and the Proud Boys? I mean, is that a hard question?
No, I think it's an easy question to answer. You say, of course I will, and then you say that, if you're, I call upon white supremacists to stand down and not inflame our cities, which they're doing in Portland and Milwaukee and some other places across the country. It's an easy answer, and yet Trump refused to answer it. In fact, his response, which some people have said is kind of a
dog whistle.
Yeah, dog whistle to the Proud Boys, was to stand by. And so they've actually added that to their recruiting. I did notice today that Amazon, to their credit, has stopped selling anything that says to stand up and stand by, which I think is the slogan the president used.
Stand down, stand by.
Yeah.
To me, it's an easy question if you don't support those groups. And I think that we've seen consistently over time that Trump struggles to answer that question. And I think it's because he supports those groups. And
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any inference you can make other than that. I don't know how many times Republicans are going to go twist themselves in pretzels to say, oh, he misspoke. Oh, he didn't say the right word. I mean, to me, when they said, when Chris Wallace, I knew I was going to say that. Chris Wallace said, will you once and for all repudiate white nationalism? And he said, give me some examples.
Right. And
I don't think you really need examples.
Right. And he knows some, right? And
Absolutely.
the other thing is, you got to wonder why he didn't just say it, because where are those guys going to vote? They're not going to vote for anybody else. They're certainly not going to vote for Joe Biden. And so I guess you run the risk of them just saying, to heck with it, and they sit out the election. But I don't see that. They want to see Trump get reelected. So they're going to vote for Trump no matter what. So why wouldn't you just come out and say, yes, I repudiate white nationalism? I don't think he can, because just like he said in Charlotte, there's good people on both sides. He never came out and said, these bad groups are causing trouble and they're all white nationalists and neo-Nazis. He just
you know who else has a strong history of supporting white nationalists is his leader, Vladimir Putin.
Oh yeah,
in Russia. That one last point on the debate, and then we'll move on. I just got to say this, that I'm not a super huge fan of his anyway, but I thought Chris Wallace was terrible as the moderator. I thought he let it get out of control, and I understand the rules were tough for him, but I think at some point he was almost like a referee that needed to call it off.
Right. I was at dinner tonight with my neighbor, and he's a pretty strong Republican, but he's pragmatic. We can talk about politics without getting upset. And he said he watched 20 minutes of the debate, turned it off, turned it back on about 20 minutes later, and they were still going at it. He said what they really needed was a single mom that had been cooped up with 3 of her kids for the last 6 months. Let her moderate. She would stand up and point a finger and say, you shut up, I'm in charge. And Chris Wallace really did a sad job at moderating, but in his defense, I don't really know what he could have done differently except to stand up and say, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to end this debate right here and right now.
Right.
And just walk off the set and leave it as it was. And
yeah.
I think he's too much of a professional to want to do that. I think that would have been a last resort for him to do. And he muddled through as best he could, but it just became just a total, chaos, and the worst debate in our presidential history.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's jump to the current ongoing saga of Amy Coney Barrett's nomination for Supreme Court.
Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett.
She's on the Hill this week. Barrett, I said Bryant, but Amy Coney Barrett. She's on the Hill this week, meeting with Republican senators. I'm not sure if any Democratic senators are going to meet with her or not. And I think their goal is in 2 weeks to start the hearings. So October 12th, I believe, is when Lindsey Graham is going to start the confirmation hearings.
Right.
What are you seeing on the nomination so far? What are you seeing as far as what's happening with story-wise?
Well, I tell you, so as we talked about before the broadcast started, if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed, which I have no doubt that she will be the 7th Catholic confirmed to the court. Currently, Catholics comprise 19.2% of the population. So, you'll have a disproportionate number of Catholics on the bench. Now, one of those, as you pointed out, is Sonia Sotomayor, who takes a totally different view than the others. But I think it will be no surprise when they overturn Roe versus Wade. In fact, Fox News just reported a couple days ago that Judge Barrett signed on to a 2-page newspaper ad in 2006 calling for the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and she slammed the landmark abortion case as barbaric.
Right.
So, for Trump to say in the debate that you don't know what her views are, yeah, I think we got a pretty good view of what her views are and how Roe versus Wade will fare under Roberts' court with Barrett on the bench.
Yeah, I agree. And in the Iowa Senate debate the other night with Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield, Joni Ernst tried to play that card too and say that she rather doubts that Roe versus Wade will be overturned. It's funny to me that this is what they've campaigned on. This is what they've pushed for. This has been their dream for 40 years.
Yep.
And now that they've got it, they don't just want to call it what it is, which is they're pushing for that. And they're pushing for overturning a woman's right to make decisions about her own body.
Right.
And so there a lot of these races, and we'll talk in a second about another thing that's related to this, but I think that Mitch McConnell might think that he's winning the war when in reality he's winning a pretty significant battle, but
Right.
he's going to lose big time at the polls. We've got some races
Right.
now where you see, we'll talk Senate polls in a little bit, but you just see people bringing up the potential for Roe v. Wade. The last poll I saw on that, 66% of the American population wanted Roe v. Wade left in place.
Right.
So we'll see that. And then also a related issue is the way that the Judge Barrett has referred to the ACA as unconstitutional. And so with the cases that are facing the court right now and the way that the Trump administration is in court trying to challenge the entire law as unconstitutional, there was an interesting vote held in the Senate today where Chuck Schumer was able to force a cloture vote on a bill he has to defund the lawsuit to stop Obamacare. And in that, it would have required 61 votes to pass because it was a cloture vote. But he got 7 Republican votes. And of those, 6 of those were Republicans who were up this time. And you had your usual suspects, Susan Collins, Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, even though you figure she probably is going to be in that group, she's been a really strong Trump supporter.
Right.
But she went ahead and voted for this. But the 2 big surprises for me on it were Joni Ernst, the aforementioned, and then also Dan Sullivan in Alaska. So you got to figure that if they're taking a vote, which they knew on a bill was not going to pass, that they took this vote symbolically to try to stake out, oh, wait, no, I'm really in favor of Obamacare. I really want to keep it. I don't want the courts to overturn it. Yet in 2-3 weeks, they're going to be voting for a justice on the Supreme Court with a lifetime appointment, who one of her main goals is to declare it unconstitutional.
Right. Well, McSally's in a she's not in a tight race. She's losing woefully. She's down 9 points. She already lost a race to a Democrat, to Kristen Sinema, 2 years ago. And now it looks like she's going to lose this race. So she's doing whatever she can to kind of, motivate her base, Trump's base, and get them out to vote to maybe save that seat.
But do you think a vote to save Obamacare is going to motivate Trump's base?
No, I think what she's hoping is that it'll get those swing voters that aren't committed either way yet, and they'll say, well, she's not all bad. She voted to save Obamacare, and and they'll vote for her. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I'm not running her campaign. But she is down by 9 percentage points right now, and in Alaska, Sullivan is only up by 1 point, which says a lot about the current political climate. A Republican who's only up by 1 point in Alaska is just, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Alaska has a history of voting Democrats in, and they kind of go back and forth sometimes. But in this climate with Trump, when he won that state, I believe by about 20 points last time.
Right.
It's very interesting that's the case, and I think there's only going to be more Maalox moments as we get closer to the elections for these Republicans, because when they think they're going to be smart by jamming this, I already mentioned about McConnell, but by jamming, or Moscow Mitch, I should say, by jamming the Supreme Court nomination through, but it's just going to front and center the extremism. And I think it's really going to drive away the moderate votes and drive them to the Democratic side in these Senate races, let alone the presidential race as well.
Right.
All right. Speaking of voting, let's talk real quick about some voter suppression issues going on, because there are a couple of things happening in the news today. In fact, in the state of Michigan, there's a couple of conservative activists who were indicted by the state attorney general, where that they are doing robocalls, and in the robocalls they're saying that they're a group called the 1599 project, and they falsely warned recipients that voting by mail would result in being, quote, finessed into giving your private information to the man. Targeting African Americans with this.
Right.
And in specifics, trying to drive down the African American vote in Detroit, because the numbers for Hillary were a lot lower than they were for Obama in 2012, and thus would have made the difference in the state of Michigan last time, and
Right.
we wouldn't be facing what we're facing right now.
Right.
So that's some of the shenanigans. We also got word out of the state of Texas that Greg Abbott, I'm trying to find the right adjective, but I'll just call him the governor of Texas.
Right.
He issued an executive order stopping and requiring all counties to only have one drop-off location for absentee ballots. And so, like, the city of Austin, I believe, had 5 or 6 locations for, I think it's 1 million plus or 1,000,004 people, something in Austin. And now they're going to only be allowed to have one drop-off point for absentee ballots, making
Right.
it a lot harder for people that don't have transportation, a lot harder for people that working, have trouble getting around to dropping those off. So let me ask you this question, G-Man. Why does it seem the Republican Party wants less people to vote?
Well, that's easy. I think the lower turnout tends to favor them. They can get their base out, and they suppress the Democratic vote, and they win. They really don't have a lot. If you look at where they are nationally, they don't have a lot to stand on. They control these states where, through fear, they use abortion as a wedge issue. A lot of their voters are one-issue voters, which is why they don't push through a constitutional amendment to ban abortion, even though they control the White House, the Senate, where constitutional amendments have to start, and the Supreme Court, and 38 state legislatures. So I think they think that whatever they can do to ensure that Democrats don't go to vote benefits them. And a lot of Democrats are lower economic status, and they can't afford to drop off their ballots. So they just, they'll stick it in the mail. And we've already seen the Trump administration's efforts at restricting mail-in ballots. So they'll stick it in the mail and it won't get there in time. They won't be able to drive and drop it off, so it gets there in time. A lot of states have rules against what they call ballot harvesting, which prevents Good Samaritans from coming to pick up your ballot and drop it off. So, yeah, I think they think it's a win-win for them if they do things like that. And what I think is eventually the populace, those swing voters that sometimes lean Republican and oftentimes lean Democrat as well, I think they see through this as just what it is. It's just voter suppression, voter shenanigans, and they're going to turn and to spite Governor Abbott, they're going to vote for the Democrats. Now, maybe not en masse this year, but certainly by 2022 and 2024, I expect the state of Texas, my home state, to turn back to being a Democratic state like it was when I was growing up.
Yeah, I think to me, it's like a poker face. It's like a tell, because why, if they're not worried about Texas, why would they be doing that?
Right. Well,
if they weren't worried that they were going to get beat, if there's full turnout and full voting, they wouldn't be doing that kind of suppression. Beto O'Rourke got very close to beating Ted Cruz last time.
Right.
And they said, oh, it's just an off-year election, and Ted Cruz's likability, shocker, he's not a very likable person. Doesn't stand up for his wife or his dad when they're accused of being ugly or assassinating JFK by President Trump and the National Enquirer.
Right.
But I think it's showing that exactly what you're saying. Texas is moving to purple status at least, and soon to be blue.
Well, the current poll shows Cornyn, which he's a popular senator. He's done a lot of good things for the state of Texas. He's been up there a long time. He's got a 10-point lead over his challenger. But in the presidential race, Trump only has a 1.6 point lead over Biden, and that is just amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about Cornyn tonight, but since you brought him up, since you introduced his name, it's like debate rules. I get to talk about him.
Right.
He had a pretty big gaffe the other day because he said he didn't think that overturning pre-existing conditions would affect that many people. And so I guess he doesn't know much about the Texas population and the Texas health system and some of the chronic illnesses like heart disease and diabetes and hypertension, those kinds of things that affect a lot of people in Texas. And when he did that, MJ Hagar, his opponent, she had her biggest fundraising day yet of the campaign.
Right.
And then also they had a pretty commercial where they were trying to paint her as like a rat, the typical Republican, like, oh, MJ Hagar is a radical and she wants to do this and this. And she's a combat veteran. I believe she got the Purple Heart, and they were showing her, she has tattoos on her arms. And so they were showing the tattoos like, oh, she's such a bad person because she's got they didn't say those words.
Right.
But, they're like radical, and they showed her like showing her tattoos. Well, there's a story behind those tattoos. She got those tattoos, and not that there's anything wrong with tattoos, because there's not, but she got those tattoos that she has to cover up the scars that she got from shrapnel wounds being in combat. And so I just think Cornyn's one of those guys that he could go into this thing way too cocky and thinking that she doesn't have a chance. And if Biden has a strong coattail, it could be the surprise of the night where if she were to knock him off. So.
Well, we've got 33 days left to the election, which is an eternity in U.S. politics. And for Trump to be leading by, 1.6 percentage points, that tells me Texas is in play. Now, I don't expect I don't expect Biden to win that state. But what I do expect is that the Trump administration, the Trump campaign will have to spend money in this state that they could spend elsewhere that will lead to some Democratic gains in other states.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, let's jump to another topic real quick, and then we'll talk polls at the end. Tell us what's happening with your old friend, Jared, Mr. Personality Kushner.
Right. Well, the Kushner company's got a pretty favorable loan from Freddie Mac, and by all accounts, they use their political influence, which you're not supposed to be able to do. So they got $786 million in loans, and then they got another $63.5 million in loans with very favorable terms, a very low repay amount, their monthly repay. And a lot of people, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's always on top of these kind of things, and Senator Tom Carper of Delaware, they're basically crying foul on this thing and saying these guys should have never been approved, and certainly shouldn't have been approved at this level, the level of money and payments that they got. So, that's something we want to keep an eye on and see how that turns out. But it certainly seems like Kushner used his influence with the White House and with the government organization Freddie Mac to get, something that the rest of us certainly wouldn't have a shot at.
I got to say, I'm in shock. I'm just in shock.
Right.
that they would do that. Don't you know they're going to be if the polls hold out and Biden wins in November and Trump leaves and doesn't have to be physically removed, that he's going to be like the guy at the Motel 6 taking every shampoo bottle and
Oh
piece
yeah.
of soap and towel out of the
Well,
White House possible.
and in Trump's defense, he wouldn't be the first one to do that. The first president to do that. Do you have any idea who that might be?
Uh, I would say maybe John Adams.
You're close. Actually, John Adams, the first to live in the current White House, left it pretty much as he found it. George Washington, the nation's first president, basically stripped everything they could out of the then White House, well, then the presidential mansion, which was in New York City. They took everything they could, silverware, drapes, tablecloths, napkins, everything that wasn't basically nailed down, they took with them and left it basically threadbare for the Adamses to come into.
That's what a terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
I think they accused the Bush administration accused the Clinton administration of taking like certain letters off the keyboards and things like that.
They did. The Clinton administration, when they left, they took all the W's off the keyboards of the computers, and I mean they left them. They left them in a bowl, in a fish bowl, so they could easily put them back on. But it was just a little political prank, just a little hijinks, if you will.
A little tomfoolery.
Yeah, a little tomfoolery. So, I mean, that kind of stuff you can deal with, because it's all in fun, And the thing is now, as you would hope it would be for every administration, the Clintons and the Bushes are like best friends. I mean,
Yeah.
Barbara Bush once said Bill Clinton was like, her son. And
Right.
so, if two families that are diametrically opposed politically can put their differences aside and become that close,
Yeah.
well, I've seen everybody, but that's definitely not going to happen with this administration.
No, and you can see at the events where the former presidents and their families are. George W. Bush has a really close relationship with Michelle Obama too. He gave her candy at his dad's funeral and just different stuff like that. That it's just common civility. But I don't expect Trump to even attend events like, I mean, he hadn't had one Kennedy Center honors where he's attended the whole time he's been in the White House because none of the honorees want to be there with him.
Right.
Which is just sad. It's really sad because you're supposed to, I think it was, he gets credit. I don't know if he was the first one to do it, but to say it. But Mario Cuomo, the former governor of New York, always said you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose.
Right.
And it was all about, you speak big and you sometimes say hurtful things when you campaign, but the whole goal when you win then is that you won and now you're everybody's governor or you're everybody's president. That was, going back to the debate, I just had another thought, but that was one of the things that stuck out to me was just that Trump constantly refers to democratic cities and democratic states. And when you talk about violence or you talk about the coronavirus, those things don't care about who's in charge.
Nope.
We need to take care of those things to protect all Americans, not just Democrats or Republicans.
Right. And that virus doesn't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or Green Party member.
It really doesn't. We'll jump to polls. I was going to leave this till the end, but there is some breaking news tonight that presidential aide Hope Hicks they've confirmed that she has contracted coronavirus.
Yep.
And she actually traveled to the debate with Trump on Air Force One and Marine One on Tuesday night too. So
probably wasn't wearing a mask while she was doing that.
Nope. So, all right, let's wrap it up tonight with some polls and let's talk about some states we've talked about one of them before, a couple of them before, but let's just focus in on three real quick states. Let's talk about the Senate races in Kansas, first of all.
Yep.
What do you see on that one with the latest polling?
Well, what I'm seeing is Bollier is up by 2, which is pretty surprising. That's the GBAO poll that has her up 45-43. I think, especially after this last debate, and as big a jerk as Trump was, I think that's going to sour some of his fringe supporters, and they're going to come over to the Democrats. And I think we're going to see this poll widen, and we're going to see, right now, I have 5 Senate seats switching over and going to the Democrats. And
it'll be the first time if Boyer wins. She'll be the first. She'll be the only right now, I believe, the first female medical doctor to be in the Senate, and she'll be the first Democrat from Kansas since 1932. So since FDR's first victory in 1932. Like I said, Kansas has got a populist history. They elected a female Democrat for governor last time. She's been very popular. She's weathered the coronavirus storm, and was one of the first governors to close the public schools there. Wasn't a popular decision when she made it, but after she made it, it's been proven the right decision. And so Boyer's picked up some really nice endorsements too. Former Senator Nancy Kassebaum from the Landon Kassebaum family, which is a pretty strong dynasty in that state. So it'll be interesting to see how that one turns out. But yeah, very close. And again, to your point earlier about Texas and the presidential race, the same thing applies to these states we're talking about now. These were states that Moscow Mitch did not think were going to be in play this time. Right. And so therefore, he thought he was going to have resources from the Republican Senatorial Committee that he could spend in Maine, or he could spend in Colorado, or he could spend in Arizona, and not have to worry about defending some of these other seats. And when you start looking at the seats that are in play, it's become a very expensive race. I mean, Lindsey Graham was on Fox News crying the other night for people to give him money because he's getting outspent like 10-1.
Right. Well, in Kansas, he's got a 8.6% lead. So, I don't know exactly how they're spending their money, but they're probably not spending a lot of money in Kansas thinking they've got that state locked up, which they probably do. And that, I think, hurts the Republican candidate there, because, the more ads you have for Trump, you can kind of coattail onto that, and you don't have to spend as much of your money. And so, it's going to come down to the wire in Kansas. It's going to be an interesting state to watch.
Yeah, it's a good point, because sometimes you get a state where the base feels like that the presidential candidate's already won. It's not in play, and the base doesn't show up, but the opposition does, and they end up squeaking out a small victory. Right. Let's go down to the great state of Mississippi now. I don't think we talked about that in our original forecast. We didn't really have Alaska or Mississippi in play. We've already talked about Alaska tonight. Right. But former Agriculture Secretary Mike Espy from the Clinton administration is running a heck of a race against Cindy Hyde-Smith. She'll always be in my memory of the of her. There's pictures of her wearing Confederate regalia from her last, when she won a special election, and then she was talking about some other candidate or some other a dignitary in the state of Mississippi, and she said, "I love him so much. If he invited me to a hanging, I would attend." Right. And which we all know.
Pretty crass thing to say.
And we all know the connotations that has in the state of Mississippi too.
Right. Yeah. And instead of hanging, that was the nice way of saying lynching.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So the latest poll I saw on that was from the Trinity Polling Company, which is a Mississippi polling company, and it has Hyde-Smith up 41 to Mike Espy at 40. So well within the margin of error, which to me, an incumbent Republican in the state of Mississippi is only up by 1 point. That's a break the glass danger moment for the Republican majority in the Senate, especially considering in March, the same polling company ran the poll, and Hyde-Smith was up 54 to 28. So you've seen a 12-point increase for Espy and a 13-point drop for Hyde-Smith.
Right. Well, when you consider that Trump leads that state by 11.4 points, I mean, there's no doubt that state is going to go for Trump when the election rolls around. So, you contrast that with the Senate race, and, Republicans got a lot to think about.
Yeah, it should be interesting. All right, let's go over and talk Georgia, and I believe this is considered Georgia 2 out of the. There's two Georgia Senate seats up.
Right.
Georgia 1 is David Perdue, who's up for re-election against John Ossoff. But we're going to talk about the other seat, which is the seat of Johnny Isaacson, who had to retire for health reasons, and then that seat was filled by Kelly Loeffler, by your favorite governor, other than Greg Abbott, Brian Kemp, and he filled it with Kelly Loeffler whenever Trump wanted him to fill it with Doug Collins, one of his lapdog defenders in the House of Representatives,
Right.
and he didn't. And so now Collins is running in this jungle primary. And interesting polling, this is the first time that Raphael Warnock, who's the lead Democrat, has come across in the lead. He's
Right.
at 31%, Loeffler's at 23%, Collins at 22%, and then Matt Lieberman, who is former Senator and Vice Presidential candidate Joe Lieberman's son, coming in at 9%.
Right.
So,
Well, and what poll was that?
I don't have down who that was with.
So the civics poll, CVIQS, which is basically a Republican polling company, they do a lot of email polling. So, and you can vote multiple times. So, I don't really consider them totally legit. But one thing is kind of curious. So they lean Republican heavily, but they've got Warnock up 49-44 over Collins. Which is,
Well, are they just doing head to heads there, or are they putting them all on the ballot?
no, they're putting them all on the ballot. And that poll was conducted September 26th through the 29th.
That's interesting because I've not seen where everybody is in the poll. Now I've seen some head to heads that are similar to that, but I've not seen anywhere where this is Quinnipiac, the one that I'm quoting.
All right, gotcha.
But
Another Republican leaning poll.
yeah, so I guarantee you, Moscow Mitch did not think either one of those seats are going to be in play
Right.
this fall.
Well, and interesting enough, that same poll has Ossoff up by 2 over Purdue, 48-46. So it could be that the state of Georgia sends 2 Democrats to the U.S. Senate. And,
If Georgia sends 2 Democratic senators, and Biden wins Georgia, it's going to be a blue tsunami.
well, funny you should say that, because in the latest polling, Biden actually has a half-point lead over Trump in Georgia, 47-46.5. So it is definitely going to be an interesting election for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of states in play that, I think everybody going into the election, everybody kind of thought everything but about 5 or 6 states was locked in.
Yep.
And there sure are a lot of other races and a lot of other states in play.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were a Republican strategist back in February, you looked at Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania as where you really needed to concentrate, and maybe a little bit in Florida, right? But now you've got Alaska and Arizona and Texas and Georgia and Mississippi and Florida all in play. And those certainly aren't things that you thought about when, back in February. You thought
even the state of South Carolina, when you got
Right.
North Carolina in play, we knew it goes back and forth. But man, the state of South Carolina, the polling has been really close. So,
right.
like you said, though, 33 days is a long time in the election process. But we've got next week we've got the vice presidential debate, which I'm anxiously awaiting that one. And then
It's a little more civil than the last.
Yeah, Mike Pence won't act like Trump. As much as I don't like Mike Pence, he won't act
Right.
like Trump.
Yeah, he's a little more civil.
Yeah, and then we'll see. We've got 2 more debates on the docket, but we'll see if Trump shows up for them. If they change the
Right.
rules and say they're going to cut his microphone off, I think that's his escape plan.
Yeah, I do too. I fully expect we've seen the only presidential debate we're going to get this cycle. If I'd like to see a couple more, but I certainly don't expect it.
I think if Don't you think the right course, if Trump says he's not going to show up, is for Biden to go ahead and show up?
Yeah, I would.
I'd
I'd
take the
show up.
airtime.
Yeah, I'd take the airtime. And I don't know if now the next debate is a town hall format. So if Trump doesn't show up, then Biden's got a perfect opportunity to basically take the 90 minutes and pitch his platform and tell people why they should vote for him, which I think would be an excellent opportunity.
Yeah.
My guess is if Trump bows out, he'll bow out a week before, right after the vice presidential debate, and the commission will cancel the debate. They won't allow Joe Biden to be there by himself.
Yeah, and we'll see how the vice presidential debate goes, and if Nikki Haley should keep her cell phone turned on.
Right. Yeah, because as you and I have talked, we fully expect to have a change at the number 2 spot if Trump continues to suffer in the polls.
Well, and his number, especially his number with women.
Right.
I mean, and he thinks, oh, I nominated a woman. Well, it doesn't do a whole lot for women when you nominate a woman who is against women's rights. So
right. Yeah, so women can kind of see through that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've had a good, lively discussion. As always, G-Man, I enjoyed it. And just remind everybody, voting has started in a lot of states. Always check your registration. Have a plan for how you're going to vote.
Yep.
As we just talked about today, the plan might have to change because you may say, "Hey, I'm going to go drop that off at the Walmart drop box," and then you find out that drop box has been removed by your governor, who doesn't want people to be able to drop it there.
Right.
So, have a plan. Make sure your vote counts, and get out there and do your patriotic duty, and recognize the fact. Don't let anybody suppress your feelings about the election. Everybody has a right to be heard, and don't get down and don't say your vote won't make a difference. Don't say that, oh, even if I vote, he won't leave, because if we win, or if Biden wins, if the progressives win, then Trump will leave, and he'll try to fight tooth and nail, but he will leave, and we can start the process of healing our country.
Right. Yeah. So Republicans, as they did with this debate, they condemned him for not calling out the white supremacists for what they are. And if Trump loses, especially if he loses by a big margin, which currently by the polls we expect, now there's 33 days before the election, that could certainly change. But if he loses by the margin that we expect, the Republicans will stand up and tell him basically, you got to get out, dude.
Yeah. Well, and if they don't, it'll just lead to the complete and total annihilation of their party.
Right. Which, as we talked before, a viable Republican Party, and a viable Democratic Party. So no matter which side you come down on, the best way for our system to work, the way the framers designed it, is to have 2 viable parties that offer checks and balances on each other. And, if we have one party dominant over the other, that's not, by a huge wide margin, then we're no different than the Chinese.
Yeah. Well, the only disagreement I'll give you there was they didn't really design it for parties, but they didn't think about it.
Right.
But
yeah.
You're right. The way the system is set up is we need strong parties. And as you and I've talked about multiple times before, I'd be in favor of 4 or 5 really strong parties.
Yeah, me too.
To try to build coalition governments and things like that. Because
like they do in Israel.
That's a way to get things done most of the time.
Yeah.
But the Republicans are going to have to go to the wilderness for a while and try to figure out what the heck they do from here, because they've ceded their party to a family, and they've let a family really ruin the foundations of one of the great political parties. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end of another edition. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yep. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.